Hello and welcome back. Now in this video we want to create our buyer schema because we want to save to MongoDB the buyer information that is coming from the auth service, and we are going to save to MongoDB. We need to set it up with Mongoose, and for that we need a Mongoose schema. Okay, now if we go to source, I'm going to create a folder called models. Okay, so we're going to start with the buyer schema. So create a new file. I'll call this buyer.schema.ts. Now before we add this, let's go back to our auth service. Okay, so go to auth service, then go to sign up. Okay, let's see the data that is sent. I think it's in the create auth, that will be inside the services, auth service. Okay, so let's see the data that we are sending to the buyer or the user service with the buyer information. Okay, so username, email, profile picture, country, created at. Okay, these are the information, and then we'll add maybe one or two other informations to the buyer schema. Okay, so we want to create a schema for this information that we are sending. Okay, so we go to buyer schema. Now to do this, I'm going to create, let me move this down, const. I'll call this buyer schema. We are using Mongoose, okay, of type schema equal to new schema, okay, right here. And then inside, we are going to define our schemes. So the first property is username, okay, and it's going to be of type string. Okay, you can set the required property to true, and we are going to index this. Remember when we were creating the table for our auth information in Mongoose, I explained what indexes do. It also applies to our MongoDB database. Okay, so the index also applies. The reason why I'm adding index to username is because we are going to create a function to search for buyer document by username. Okay, so that is why I'm indexing this property right here, and I can duplicate this. This is going to be email. Email is going to be of type string. It is required, and I am also indexing it as well. Okay, then the next one is profile picture. So profile picture, this is going to be type string and then required. Or required, I'll set it to true. We don't need to index this, okay, because we are not going to search for buyer documents using profile picture, so this is not going to be indexed. And then I'll add country. It's going to be a string and it's required as well. And then what property I want to add is seller. Okay, so this is going to be a boolean, and it's required. Here we can even leave the is required because we are going to have a default property and it's going to be false. Okay, so by default this is seller property for every document that is created is set to false, and then when a user creates a seller's account, we are going to update it from false to true. Okay, and then I want to add another property called purchased gigs. Okay, so this is going to be an array. It's going to contain the ID of all the gigs that the user purchased. Okay, so here I'll set the type to mongoose.schema.types.objectID. Okay, so let me, so I already have Mongoose right here, and then reference will be the gig schema. Okay, let me see why it's okay, Mongoose is not yet imported. Okay, so let me fix this. Okay, so the reason why I'm setting this ref to gig is because the gig database as well is going to be a MongoDB database. Okay, so the gig database is also a MongoDB database. if it were to be another type of database, maybe Postgres or MS SQL database, we don't need to set this ref. We can set this to whatever probably the ID of the row in the database table is. If it's a MySQL database, probably we'll set the ID here, okay, and the ID will be of type number. But since gig is going to be a MongoDB database, I'm setting the ref, and the ref type is going to be mongoose.schema.types.object_id, okay. And then I'll set created at. I'll set this to type date, okay. So these are the properties we're going to have for the buyer. And then on the front end, when the user logs in, if the user is a buyer and also a seller, then when the user logs in, we are going to fetch the buyer information and the seller information of that particular user, of that logged in user, okay. Then one other thing I want to do is here, I will just set the version key to false. Okay, so normally when Mongoose or MongoDB returns the document, it always adds this __v data, okay, property. So I don't want the property to be returned. It just specifies the version. Okay, now let us go ahead and create the model. So const buyer model of type model, and the model is going to be buyer document, import from our library, okay, and this is going to be equal to model, okay, model, and then we pass the type right here, and then the name of the model is going to be buyer, and then we pass our schema, our buyer schema. Okay, so we pass this. Now let's go ahead and export. So this is going to be export buyer model. Okay, so if you hover on this model, you can see it accepts a name, it accepts a schema. Okay, so a name, a schema, and then there are some other optional properties that you can add. You can set a collection. So our collection right here, I will just set this to buyer as well. Okay, so the collection name is going to be the same right here. Okay, so this is the schema for our buyer. Once we send the data from the auth service, we are going to create the document in the MongoDB database using this information. In the next video, we're going to create for the seller.